Hi all! Wow, so I hit 1,000 subscribers. Yay! I can get champagne later. So I want to do something kind of fun and do a 1,000 subscriber Q&A. Asked y'all to send me in some questions. You did. So we're just gonna have a little fun time where I answer some of the cool questions y'all asked. All right, first question. So at this point, I'd say you're pretty well qualified to talk about a variety of animal-related topics. My question is, did you always know you wanted to do something related to animals, or did the idea kind of develop over time? I mean, I was one of them little kids who liked animals. And as I got older, I think I kind of veered away from that because in my head, the idea was working with animals was very science related, and ideally, if you have a background or are really thriving in kind of STEAM settings, you're better qualified to work with animals. So for a really long time, even when I was working these podunk jobs or I was taking snakes to kids' birthday parties and stuff, I just kind of didn't think I could do it seriously just because it's a very, very competitive industry and they really are going to probably ideally want to take someone with a more academic background in those science settings. So for a really long time, it just wasn't something I considered doing seriously. And it wasn't until I got a different podunk job taking reptiles to kids' birthday parties that I realized I was good at this, and I became a little more driven to see if I could do it in a career setting. I mentioned this, my original background was costume design, which didn't work out for a multitude of reasons. And so I didn't really find this passion of, doing animal-based stuff until I was in my 30s. So that's something I like sharing with people. I think there's a big expectation now with younger generations that you need to know what you want to do as soon as you're in high school. You need to follow that right academic track to get into a right college, to have those proper academic things, and you're supposed to go to the right college and have the right degree, and you're supposed to hop out of the gate at fucking 22 years old knowing exactly what you want to do for the rest of your fucking life. And I don't think that's possible. You can fuck around a lot. Your brain isn't even fully developed at 22. It took me a really long time to get this point, and I'm going to be honest, I feel like I wasn't really in a place mentally I could have done it in my 20s at all. So even if I'd done that proper academic path, in my teens and my 20s where I was supposed to, I don't think I would have gotten to where I am today just because along with that experience I was developing in my 20s and 30s, I was also kind of gaining, I think, an emotional maturity into how to handle more difficult situations and just have emotional regulation and things that give me the tools to do my job really, really well. The job I do now, which is called exhibit interpretation, I didn't even know that job existed until 3 years ago. So, that's my advice to teens. Go to college if you want to, but, there's no shame in kind of, fucking around and kind of taking your time to figure out what you want to do and where you really thrive as a person. We're going to follow up that into a similar related question. Can you talk about your experience with the zoo worker field, pros, cons, etc.? I do not speak for the zoo I work for. I do not speak for any zoos. I'm speaking of my own opinions. So the big thing of zoos is when there's controversy around them, it's very, the animal is in a cage. He's in animal jail. He's sad. And that's usually what it boils down to when people say they don't like zoos. That's their problem with zoos. But we really, really ignore the fact that there's an intense amount of very classist gatekeeping that goes into the zoo world. They are looking for academic backgrounds. So you're looking at people who had the means to get a degree in complete college. And outside of that, you're also, many of these zoos do not pay their interns. And many of these zoos will not hire you unless you have some level of experience. So you are looking at unpaid internships. You're looking at either part-time or seasonal work until you can land something full-time. And as you can imagine, that puts a lot of people not capable to apply for these positions. It is a challenge for y'all. Next time you go to a zoo, I want you to look around. I want you to try to find people who are zookeepers. When you find other people who are zookeepers, I want you to notice how many of them are white. I want you to see if you can notice any zookeepers who are people of color, let alone black people. There's a big, big problem with this in the world of zoos. Another thing with zoos also is there's a huge, huge wage disparity. So on top of all these very staunch requirements of degrees and unpaid internships and multiple seasonal jobs before you get something permanent, you are getting paid very, very little. So many of these people who are keepers are usually unable to get to the point where they can even get a full-time paying job without some sort of financial support. So there's a lot of privilege there that, like I said, we don't really talk about and the public isn't aware of because they're not focused on the fact that some zoo is hiring for a part-time position at the butterfly garden that pays $10 an hour and requires a bachelor degree. They're focused on, these very bygone concepts and concerns. Oh, the animals are in cages. In terms of what zoos do, I just think it's neat. I think it's neat to see animals. I know it's superficial, but zoos also do really, really important conservation work. The very, very cynical part of me says that if we keep going the way we're going in terms of climate change, zoos are going to be one of the last few places these animals can live. They have good lives. It's important in a zoo to make sure these animals have good lives. We want them to be happy. And you get people concerned about the animals at the zoo and they go, they look sad, you need an animal jail. But I'll put it this way. These animals have all the food they want. There's entire departments devoted to making sure these animals are happy in terms of enrichment. If you're a solitary animal, you don't have to deal with other animals. If you're a sociable animal, you get animal pals. You get free health care. If you're an animal at a zoo, you get free health care. You get preventative care. Like, I cannot say that about the majority of the population here in the United States. Yes, I would argue the animals at the zoo are happier than we are, because they get snacks and they get free health care. More animal questions. Have you read Born Free? And if so, what did you think of it? So I have not. So Jen, I know this is a book you're really, really fond of. I went on Jen's Have You Seen This podcast, and we talked about Christian the Lion, which involves some people who are responsible for the original Born Free. And that's weird. I actually have not read it, and I kind of want to now, though I'm kind of curious what's changed, because Born Free, if you don't know, is a story of a lion, I believe Elsa, who was raised with people, and eventually they took steps to get her released into the wild. But I'm always kind of curious about this world of, like, there's an animal, and you raise it like a person just because it never ends good. This is something interesting where Born Free is like an older story, and it's based on older events, but you can still go on fucking TikTok and Instagram and see people just like with fucking cougars in their house. And it is something that very, very much bothers me in terms of social media, because you're normalizing something. And even with groups, and I know there's people who have the means or license and they've taken in foxes and raccoons and animals that couldn't be returned to the wild, they didn't print it on. And I do fully believe these people who are taking care of them in these circumstances are very informed. They're giving the animals what they need. But that being said, if you just look that up, you're still seeing a raccoon in someone's house sleeping on a bed. And that very much, I think, normalizes this idea to have exotic pets, which is very frustrating because that in turn kind of exasperates the exotic wildlife pet trade. And we do tend to think of other people, like in terms of poaching and, taking, baby servals, like to keep as pets and stuff, as something like people do in other regions. But the United States is one of the biggest importers of the exotic wildlife trade. So this isn't some xenophobic, this is other people do this. This is something we do. That's my own personal gripe in terms of social media stuff. I can't go in and fucking police everybody, but I do wish people wouldn't share that stuff so frequently. It's something I wish we had a little more critical thinking of when we kind of absent-mindedly browse online. More animal questions. I think I've asked this before, but how come hamsters are resistant to alcohol? I don't remember you asking me this, but like I said, maybe I just didn't have time to answer. But this is really cool, so we'll share this a little bit. So most animals outside of us can't process alcohol. It just makes them full out sick, as opposed to us where it makes us feel kind of nice and then it makes us sick. And for those of you who do not know, Syrian hamsters don't get drunk, essentially. like other animals where they can get drunk and they can get a lot sicker than we could, hamsters don't get drunk. And the theory is, and I think this is really interesting, is hamsters are this little rodent creature. They're going around, they're eating grains and stuff. And there's a very high chance the little things they're nibbling on would have eventually kind of fermented over time. And the theory is that hamsters just built up an immunity to alcohol, so the little poor hamsters didn't get like little hamster cirrhosis in their liver, basically. So they've evolved to become alcohol resistant simply because they had a higher chance of coming into things that were fermented and would make them drunk. Those hamsters can hold their liquor. Capybaras are native to South America, but they seem to enjoy Japan and anywhere else they're brought. They aren't carnivorous like house cats, so like with the rise of popularity of capybaras, could we be looking at a capybara instrumentality in a decade or so? Ooh, that's a really good question. Ages ago, when I was like just getting started out in the baby YouTube world, I made a video on capybaras, and the one thing I brought up is they've sort of started to become normalized as animals you can just sort of keep. Going back to what I say, I think that's a bad idea. We've had hundreds and thousands of years to domesticate animals like traditional pets. That took a really long time to make them chill with us and make them codependent on us. What a capybara needs to thrive are things we cannot always accommodate because we haven't really like domesticated a capybara. And there's a big difference between domestication and tamed. You can have a capybara that's socialized. I'd say even though animals in zoos are wild animals, they're still very much more used to people than their wild counterparts would be. But domestication is just basically selective breeding for centuries. So as much as I love the ideas of more capybara in the world, just from a pragmatic place of mind, I need to say unlikely. I think that's all my animal questions, so now we're going to be moving on to media questions. Hey Emma, do you have any movies that you started and just couldn't finish them? In terms of I turned them off because they either sucked or like I was too disturbed or upset to watch, I don't think so. I do notice I have trouble kind of keeping up with TV shows a lot of the time. So there's stuff I'll kind of start watching and just sort of lose interest in for the most part. No, off the top of my head, I can't think of a movie where I was just like, ugh, no, like I'm done with this. My one fun story is I was trying to watch Sex and Fury back in January of 2020, and I do not remember why I stopped. I think we were gonna watch something else, or it was time to go do something. I think July of 2021, we finally like watched all of Sex and Fury, which I would recommend. It's very good. It is a Pinky film. Look up the concepts of Pinky films and kind of what those films are, because there is some disturbing content in that. So just be forewarned. Don't be like, oh, wow, Sex and Fury. I'm gonna go watch this with my family. Don't do that. Wow, you ever forget to read one of the questions and then you realize you need to record it, but the washing machine was on? I do. Anyway, what's the most frustrating storytelling convention that you see applied in media that you think is either unnecessary or even counterproductive? Wow, hands down, just same thing I was complaining about in the Full Metal Alchemist video, and something you see especially now in kind of mainstream movies, especially kind of superhero and of course Marvel movies. The whole, the system is good, it just needs to be run by good people. We don't need to dismantle the system, we just need the good people in charge. Hate it. Early impressions of Die Dark. So Die Dark was Kyu Higashira's next manga after Dorohedoro. I read a few chapters, and then I sort of, like, I lost interest, or I think I got to the point, where I kind of, like, got caught up, and I was like, oh, that's good. It didn't, like, hook me, though early chapters can be a little tricky in kind of what they lead you to. And you do kind of think about that, which is, with manga, people are like, it's really good. I don't think anyone's, like, coming in and saying that after, like, chapter 1. I think it takes a couple of volumes for people to be like, this is really good, and then start spreading it by word of mouth. So I might try to check out Die Dark again, because like I said, I really like Dorohedoro, obviously. So we shall see. We'll see if I come back to that. And final one. I'd be interested in hearing about media that you consider quality, but cannot fucking stand anyway. What falls in this category, and how do you feel about rejecting stuff like that? Well, that's a really good question. So usually stuff I don't really like is stuff just a little too saccharine, kind of what the kids would call like tenderqueer stuff. I'm not super interested in media aimed for children, but also I always say this, the talk, Queen Firestorm is an allegory for like a toxic parent. I'm not really interested in that stuff at this point. I don't really like saccharine things. Like, I don't really rewatch Disney movies. I don't really watch any kind of stuff of sort of a PG rating now as an adult. I don't think it's bad. I just think for me, I tend to like a little more kind of nuance, I think, in my stories about traumatic people. Like, I like The Witcher, which I think boils down to somebody who went through a lot of trauma and is very sad and rejected in their life. But it's like a fun power fantasy, and you could do these deep dives into like Geralt's desire to form connections and his own kind of sad upbringing. But at the same time, like, it's not like Steven Universe. Jaskier isn't going to sit down with Geralt and be like, gee, Geralt, I think you have complex post-traumatic stress disorder. Whereas in Steven Universe, there is an entire fucking episode where they say, gee, Steven, we think you have complex traumatic stress disorder. In terms of how I feel about rejecting stuff like that, it's like, I don't know, like, sometimes you can just not like something. There's a lot of talk now about kind of pros and antis and kind of these new moral crusades and haze codes we're attempting to do, and we can't just say we don't like Steven Universe. We have to say we don't like Steven Universe because it condones abusive relationships. I feel like we kind of weaponize like kind of this self-care language, which is frustrating for me because I do really appreciate how online now we've kind of had little circles where we've kind of made people more kind of aware of their emotions, aware of their backgrounds and stuff. We didn't really have that when I first started getting online and the aughts and everything. So I like that we have this, and to make it really sad and be like, oh, well, Steven Universe is toxic, and if you like that, you're toxic, and just throwing these really fucking heavy words around like toxic and abuse and grooming and things that are like actually serious, actually fuck people up, and you're like using them to condemn to cartoon, female coded characters who might smooch. And it's very odd for me. And I'm not against like kind of discussing this stuff and breaking it down. Obviously, my Full Metal Alchemist video is me really kind of breaking down my own personal problems I have with the show. But I'm not going to go out and be like, you're a neoliberal chud if you like Full Metal Alchemist. And it just sort of bums me out that a lot of people are in this state of just sort of despair and frustration and helplessness that they have to go and get mad at people about like cartoon shows and stuff, especially like queer cartoon shows. Honestly, like a lot of that shit's kind of frustrating because at the end of the day, it's like, I don't know, it's a big world out there. All right, that was my 1,000 subscriber Q&A. This was fun. Like I said, I know 1,000 is like small fry, but this is kind of cool. It's cool to do these videos. I am happy to have taken everyone's questions. Those were good questions, everyone. Thanks. I do have an exciting plan for a video I'm going to be doing, fingers crossed, in October, and I will keep you all updated on that because I can make posts to the community now on my YouTube because I have 1,000 subscribers. Yay! So thank you so much for the subscribes. It means a lot. I hope everyone is doing good out there. Stay safe. Get vaccinated. Like do the cool shit. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. This was fun. Yay. All right. I'll see y'all around.